Information questions. Questions relating to finding factual information are a common type of TOEFL reading question. The information questions often begin in the following way. According to the passage, which is true, or what is mentioned? This type asks you to find some specific information in the passage which is mentioned explicitly or implicitly in the passage. In this chapter, we learn how to answer information questions. To answer information questions, you need to be able to scan the passage. Scanning means reading the passage to pinpoint sentences that contain the information asked in the question. To scan the passage, you first determine the keyword in the question and then scan the passage to locate the keyword. Once you locate the sentence, you should read the sentence with the keyword and also a few sentences before and after the keyword sentence carefully. For a few hard information questions, you will have to read the whole paragraph to find the answer, but for most cases, you only need to read a few consecutive sentences. Based on the scan reading method, you will usually have your own idea for the answer since the answers for the information questions are stated in the passage. You should read the options and choose the one that matches with your answer. Keep in mind that the correct option is the one that properly responds to a given question. In other words, when eliminating wrong options, you need to make sure why wrong options are wrong. Wrong choices will often refer to information that is in the passage but is unrelated to the question being asked. So when looking for an answer in the passage, you need to make sure you understand the question. Another way a choice can be wrong is that it will say something that sounds good or is even factually true, but is not supported by the passage. The answers to information questions will always be supported by information contained in the passage. Also, a wrong choice might connect two pieces of information in the passage in a wrong way. Sometimes there are two options that seem like equally good answers. This can happen when you understand the material superficially or are not thinking about the logical relationship between facts. TOEFL information questions can be divided into two types, the what type and the which type. The what type questions are marked by the interrogative pronoun what. This type asks you to provide specific information. For this type, you first need to read the relevant part in the passage to find the relevant information. You then choose the option that corresponds to what you found in the passage. In addition to what, why, who, when, and how can also be viewed as the what type question since they ask for specific information. By contrast, which type questions do not ask you to find specific information. Instead, it asks you to evaluate provided choices and choose the one that describes correct information. For this type, you should read each option first, and then scan for the sentences in the passage that include the keywords in the options, and determine whether the description is true or false.
This is an example of what type question.
Briefly skim the passage. According to the passage, what does the presence of grains inside some of the chondrules indicate? The key word is grains. When we scan the passage for grains, we find this sentence as a clue. A few chondrules contain grains that survived the melting event, so these enigmatic chondrules must have formed when compact masses of nebular dust were fused at high temperatures, approaching 1700 degrees Celsius, and then cooled before these surviving grains could melt. The grains in chondrules suggest that the chondrules were formed at high temperatures and then cooled before the grains could melt. Based on this knowledge, let's look for an option that corresponds to ours. A. The chondrules were formed of silicate material. The passage says, these seeds are actually chondrules, millimeter-sized melted droplets of silicate material. So A describes a true fact, but it does not answer the question, which is, what does the existence of grains inside chondrules imply? B. The chondrules were formed at high temperatures and then cooled rapidly. B corresponds to what we found in the passage, so is the correct option. C. The grains were formed in huge areas of the solar nebula.
C is not mentioned.
The passage says that the melting and rapid cooling suggests that the chondrules were formed locally.
But it does not say how the grains in chondrules were made.
D. The grains were formed after the chondrules were fused together into the chondrites.
D is false, since the grains were formed before the chondrules, as the following passage indicates.
A few chondrules contain grains that survived the melting event, so these enigmatic chondrules must have formed when compact masses of nebular dust were fused at high temperatures, and then cooled before these surviving grains could melt. Answer B.
This is an example of which type question?
Skim the passage briefly. Which of the following is true about the death of the sun? A. It is conjectured that the sun will die as a black dwarf. B. The white dwarf state of the sun will be the shortest. C. The sun will reach a white dwarf star before becoming a red giant. D. During the subgiant stage, the sun will release all its material into space. Analysis. A is correct, since the phrase, its final death, a hypothetical black dwarf, means that a black dwarf is a conjecture. B is incorrect, since the white dwarf will survive for trillions of years. C is incorrect, since the order is the other way around. First a red giant, then a white dwarf. D is incorrect, since it will retain half of the present-day mass. Answer A. Answers for information questions are already stated in the passage. So this type can be very easy to answer, especially if a choice uses exactly the same wording. But a question can be challenging if a synonym or a paraphrase is used in the correct option. While infrequent, the question can be difficult to answer if it requires you to synthesize information scattered around in the passage or to make some inference. In other words, a difficult information question will look like an inference question. So let's examine the correct answer types for information questions.